It's the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast, episode 38. You're both a fan of AI and task management, having achieved gains in both areas over the years. The recent outbreak of LLMs has made you hungry for better task management using AI solutions, but nothing seems to be happening.
So you keep looking for AI companies, hoping that one of them will offer insights, but they have not made any progress beyond making some vague recommendations, some really bland stuff. You're thinking to yourself, there must be a way. It must make my task management better. There must be a way to make improvements using new technology. But the waiting game is killing you. Maybe these companies are missing an understanding of the fundamentals of task management. And if so, what can be gained from having some very special insights? Tune into this episode to hear from me and my special guest, Dr. Brad Aeon, as we tackle and maybe even try to solve this wicked problem together. I'm Francis Wade, and welcome to the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast. And welcome back. And as you can see, we're joined on the stage by Dr. Brad Aeon. And just before I introduce Brad, let me welcome and thank you for joining us here at the Task Management Time Blocking Podcast. A few things about this podcast I want to let you know in case you're thinking that we do things traditionally around here. We don't. We do special stuff. It's different, right? So what we're trying to do is solve a problem. Unlike other kinds of interviews, typical podcasts, in this case, I've invited Brad to join me in my, virtual laboratory. I'm in Jamaica, he's in Canada. And the idea is that we're going to tackle the problem of improving task management using AI together. And the way we're going to do this is hopefully illuminate the way we do our own thinking and make our own improvements so that you can make your own. So we're trying to come up with insights that would actually give you the ability to have your own insights and have your own understanding of your own task management. So in the first part of the program, we'll be talking about the nature of the problem and why it's so bad and what makes it so difficult and why people struggle with task management in general and why AI companies have not yet come up with any improvements of a material nature. Second part, we're going to be looking at the solutions, kind of what Einstein said. Einstein said if you don't know how to solve a problem, he spent 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. So we're hoping to get some serendipity going here in our conversation, some surprises. And if we do, we'll ring an insight bell, which will be an indication that we said something that's remarkable in some way, or that I've said something that Brad hasn't heard, or he said something that I've never heard before. So let me introduce Brad. Brad, well, let me just say welcome to you and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Great. So who is Brad? Well, he's a time management expert and researcher. He did his Ph.D. on time, well-being, and productivity at Concordia University. And today, he works with organizations around the world to help them implement the latest research on time management. His insights and ideas have been featured in top-tier media outlets, including the Harvard Business Review, BBC News, The Guardian, The Atlantic, and many more. His TEDx talk, The Philosophy of Time Management, explores some of the most recent and important ideas in time management, and it's been viewed by hundreds of thousands of people on YouTube. And it's a real pleasure to have Brad here. And let me start off by reading a story, and then I'll ask Brad to comment on the story of Julian. So who is Julian? Okay, well, Julian is a hard worker who loves making productivity improvements. He's also a fan of ChatGPT, and he loves to play around with it. He's made improvements in his job as a researcher that are truly inspiring compared to his peers. However, he also feels as if his personal task management is still where it was before he discovered LLMs a few years ago. In other words, he's thinking that there should be a way to make fewer errors, feel less stressed, and do the right things at just the right moment. But, big but, his performance in this area, in task management, has not improved at all. So he's better than, the average guy who works in the office, other people he works with, but he's still not satisfied. He keeps asking ChatGPT, Perplexity, DeepSeek, all of the players for ideas on how to improve his task management, but they're of no help. They're just repeating a bunch of conventional wisdom. He's also an impatient guy. He doesn't want to sit around and wait for a software developer to come up with an answer because that could take forever. He hates thinking. I don't know where to start, but this thought has woken him out of his sleep. He is really bothering him. So let's go into diagnosing what's happening with Julia. Brad, first impressions, reactions to the story of Julian.
It's very hard to do. Task management is essentially how you want to when you want to do certain tasks and what are the tasks that you want to do in the first place. So it's there's a component of there's a million things you want to do. There's a million things you can do. So how do you choose? So that's step number one. Step number two is once you've selected those tasks, when do you do them and how do you do them? That by definition assumes that you know who you are, you know what you want, you know what your values, you know your goals, and no one's going to know that better than you. And that's why I think a lot of automated or semi-automated task management apps are struggling. They're suboptimal because by definition they don't know you as well as you do. So they can help you make certain choices, based on a few rules of thumb, like I don't know, you're more tired in the afternoon, therefore it's maybe better for you to do XYZ in the morning. Those are the things that can be quote unquote recommended. But other than that, I think the main problem here is that until there's some kind of AI that fully knows you, who you are, what you want, your preferences, your beliefs, it's going to be hard to kind of automate that particular aspect of task management.
Well, it's not to say that there's no hope, right?
I'm sorry, was that?
It's not to say that there's no hope for us.
I mean, there's a lot of hope. There's a stream of research that I find very, very interesting, and it's this. I think it started, or at least it was popularized by Paul Meehl, Meehl, Paul Meehl, and it's essentially this idea of statistical versus clinical prediction. So you give a bunch of doctors some data, and they have to predict health outcomes, and you do the exact same thing with a statistical formula, a very simple formula that takes a few variables, a few factors, and then tells you this is what's probably going to happen. And this was decades ago. So it's not even like some kind of advanced AI. And consistently, the statistical formula would outperform the clinical prediction. Yes, the doctors. And so I think this is something that's been known for a while. This is something that's, I guess, a bit that people don't want to. Some people, at least, don't want to admit to because they're like, "Oh, what do you mean a simple, stupid formula will do better than me?" But the reality is that the formula is a formula. It's not. Once you program it to do something, it's not going to be affected by our own biases, by being fatigued, by the fact that it's post-lunch time and you might be more tired because you just had lunch. And because of that, there's a lot less noise, if that makes sense. The decisions are consistent and usually better than human made decisions. And I think this definitely happens more and more, not only with AI, but just without AI. One thing that I found very interesting, for instance, is that over the past few years, I developed a very simple formula that you can use on an Excel spreadsheet, where you take a bunch of tasks and you just give them a few, you just pick a few variables like importance, the deadline, the progress you've made, the complexity of the task, the feasibility. And based on like 3, 4, maybe 5 factors, you input the scores for each task. So this task is more important. This task is, the deadline is earlier. And the formula is fairly simple, but it computes a priority score. And based on that, you can see which tasks have a higher priority score. And what's interesting is that people are often like, I would not have thought of that, but this actually makes a lot of sense. And of course, very often I would not have thought of that because we're human beings. A lot of people are smart, but in the sense we're limited. We're not thinking of all things at the same time consistently. Because again, there's a term for that. It's boundedly rational. There's a boundary to our rationality. And so because of that, we see that in many instances, if you use a formula to prioritize your tasks, assuming you're good at assessing importance, deadlines, and so on, it will outperform you in most cases. Because when you ask people to use their intuition, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes people are tired, sometimes people have cognitive biases, like they prefer urgency over importance. And that leads to priority decisions that are not necessarily optimal. So all that to say that, when you say is there hope? Absolutely, there's hope. I think more and more AI will be capable. I think it's already capable of asking us detailed question about, hey, who are you? What's your age? What are your aspirations? What do you want out of life? Are you an early riser? Do you go to bed late? What kind of work do you do? If I give you task A, B, C, what would you choose? And based on that, it would be able, in principle, to give you really, really good task management options.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me. And matches my experience. So I used actually a narrow AI driven software called Schedpile, starting in about 2015 or so, and it did that optimization you're talking about. It went even further. Actually, it went into your schedule and then changed your schedule and shuffled it around. You could designate which part was fixed, which part was variable, and it would work on the variable parts of your schedule and optimize it in some different ways that you're talking about. Which and it worked up to a point. It's no fault of the software, or it's no fault of your spreadsheet. It seems now, years later, I still sort of use it in the background. It's become pretty complex because it turns out that the optimization of a schedule, of an individual schedule, is a wicked problem by itself. But I don't find myself using it as often. But it's not because it doesn't work. And I could put the time in to figure out the new nuances and the new things they've put in. It's that over time I've become more skillful at managing my tasks with a minimum of capture. So I don't need to go through the discipline of writing everything down. Because as as our listeners may know, that we've had prior episodes where we've talked about the fact that tasks are psychological objects. You create these commitments in your mind, and in a simple world, when you're 10 years old, they come to mind and you do them. And then a little bit later on, somewhere in your teens, too many of them come to mind for you to do in the moment. Like you can't do next week's homework, right? Well, I guess you could. Brad, you're probably a guy who did next week's homework. The rest of us, however, we're like, oh, we're not going to do the homework now. So we put the homework off. And what we discovered is that if we didn't somehow capture the homework, then when next week's deadline comes, we wouldn't have done it. So we learned that, okay, that there's something valuable in capturing all of your tasks and doing it religiously. But what I've found, so this goes against everything I teach in my courses, everything in my book, everything, all orthodoxy thrown out the window. But what I've found is that I only need to do that in special situations where I'm really overloaded or something big is at stake. So I have a conference coming up in June, and for the 2 weeks leading up to that conference, I better write everything down, or else I'll be dysfunctional. I'll mess things up. So in that 1 month, 2 week kind of window just before this major conference, I have to use that technique. But for the rest of the year, I'm actually okay without it. And so that's made me wonder, there's something unnatural about, and guys, folks, if you're listening in, you're probably going to burn my book and say everything against it he said, and if you've taken one of my courses, you'll know that I'm like, this is like calling forth Lucifer. This is like the opposite of everything. But there is something unnatural about taking a psychological object and rendering it as a digital object or a physical object. It's not pure in the sense that you're a human being and it's a psychological object. If there were a way to manage a psychological object and leave it in your psychology and still be effective, we'd all go for it. In that 1 month of stress, I would definitely go for it. If I could just think, in other words, oh, I need to send out 100 emails. And if that thought could get instantly translated into something in an AI, I'm talking like the perfect, I don't know, this is like getting into solutions, but the point is, if I could somehow bridge the gap between thought and execution, and bridge it in a way that is natural, doesn't involve any paper, doesn't involve any bits and bytes, doesn't involve anything digital. If I could do it, I would. So if I had the perfect person sitting beside me, the perfect secretary or admin, and as soon as a thought came into my mind, I would immediately say it to the admin. That would be a step closer, because then I wouldn't have to process it. And if the admin were supercharged with AI powers, then I wouldn't care. But there's something about the translation from thought into other forms and then into action that I've recently, I guess, found laborious. And well, let me see if that resonates with you any at all, and if I'm not just talking crazy talk from here in Jamaica.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. For a person like you who I think already knows what he wants and what you want to do, your goals, you've already reflected on exactly the kind of projects you want to engage in. I think for a lot of people, the issue is that they may have the I think it's called the shiny object syndrome, where you get easily distracted from something that's important because, there's I could be doing this thing, I could be doing this side project and this other side project, and I think that even though we live in a world where, like you said, there's a lot of friction from thought to execution, because you have to think the thought, think about what that entails, the tasks, the subtasks, what I need to do, I need to note it down, I need to reach out to this person. So there's a lot. It's almost like I guess for a lot of people, it's a useful barrier, because it says there's so many things you can do. But because of all these barriers, now you're going to be forced to choose, because all of these things that you want to do require time and effort. And
Mhm.
obviously, you can't do them all without going insane. So
Mhm.
you'll have to choose. And I think this idea of telling people you have to choose forces them to be more deliberate about what they want out of life. Um, because I don't know if you've ever read that novel. I think it was, yes, it was Brave New World, where instead of tasks, it was, or thoughts about what you want to do, psychological objects, as you said. Uh, it was pleasures. Like you think of any pleasure, uh, like being with someone, eating some food. If I remember well, there was a principle in that novel, in that future, where the goal of society was to remove any kind of friction between thinking about a certain pleasure and getting it almost immediately. So removing all kinds of friction. And I think the subtext of that novel was that that can't be good for you, because
Cannot be good. My mind just went to bonobos, monkeys. They have sex all
yes,
24
that was,
hours a
I
day.
think that
They're
was
having
it.
sex. I'm
Yes.
like, oh boy, where's Brad taking us here?
Well, that was essentially the what the society was in Brave New World. And I think, in a sense, that is why a lot of people get overwhelmed. It's not that the world we live in is demanding. And I know that a lot of people disagree with this. They think we live in a world where we work more than ever, that things are more demanding and stressful than ever. I think that that's kind of missing the point. If you look at how people lived in the 1870s,
Mm-hmm.
working 100, 120 hours a week per week in the mines and the fields, uh, that was stressful. That was not only
Mm-hmm.
stressful, that was time consuming, grueling, and I'm not even going to talk about the work conditions in the
Mm-hmm.
mines or in the fields, breaking your back day in, day out. You might very well die before age 50. Um, in many ways, we have it a lot better today,
Easier.
and that also comes with this feeling that, oh my god, there's so many more things I can do. And I think that stems from this fact that things in general, not everything, but things in general are easier to do.
Mm-hmm.
uh, there's many ways in which starting a business is easier today.
Mm-hmm.
Learning a new language is easier today. And so
Mm-hmm.
the friction, the barriers from thought to execution are getting
Mm-hmm.
reduced. But that also means that people might be more likely to feel that fear of missing out. Like, yeah, sure,
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning Italian,
Yeah.
I'm starting my yoga business, I'm doing this, but there's so much more I can be doing. When I look at the world around me, there's so much more I can be doing. So I think, in a sense, it's probably good, again, for most people, that
Mm-hmm.
those, at least those remaining barriers exist, because otherwise we would be spreading ourselves way too thin.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my first impression
Yeah.
on that.
That's an insight. I'll go ring the bell for that one. For sure. Because I definitely hadn't thought of it that way. That the friction actually teaches you some discipline, and it allows for it forces a kind of reflection. Um, at the same time, we it's great to have the technologies that we have. I did some exercise. I ride a stationary bike for a few hours each Sunday morning, and now and again I don't know why it happens, but now and again I have a bunch of brainstorms. Usually I'm listening to a podcast or several podcasts, but I had a set of brainstorms, and I had about 4 or 5 ideas or actions to take. So I'm on the bike, I'm sweating up a storm, and I have the computer in front of me. I'm doing what's called Zwift, and I have I'm listening to the podcast on a tablet. So I have to grab the phone. I have to, sweaty fingers and all. I have to go into Google Keep, and I definitely have to capture these kinds of fleeting ideas, because if I don't capture them right away, they're gone. That's what things like that. And sometimes it happens more around conference time that these ideas just float away, and I'm not fast enough. But even in those moments where I'm doing something else, and I formed a commitment to do a task, and I have to capture it in that moment because it'll be gone any other way. And if I hadn't learned through the friction that you're talking about that I needed a system like that, um, I'd probably rely on memory first of all. But what if I could? Let's play not devil's advocate, but let's play AI. What if I had an open AI channel? Maybe to my thoughts is maybe too much to ask for at this point. But if I had a free AI channel to dump all of my tasks upon creation. Let's say that I did know that I was creating too many tasks.
Mhm.
So an idea behind capturing everything, ubiquitous capture, is that you capture everything, even though you may later on, when you're doing your emptying, you may realize that half of them are not going to get done ever.
Yeah.
But the unfiltered capture, um, let's say that we've learned that that's a good thing. There still isn't any, as far as I know, there's no AI for capture. There's no one trying to solve that problem. And it's a completely ubiquitous problem. Everybody has it, and apparently it's gonna get easy. I know there's some software that you could kind of sort of, but when I'm riding on a bicycle, I can't quite command my phone to capture a task if my phone is just sitting there. Um, as far as I know, hold on, maybe there is a way to do it, but it's not connected to anything else. It's just one way to do it. Actually, I'm not sure. Have you heard of any? And this is where the AI versus just voice recognition. Um, those would be two different kinds of levels, but I've not seen any AI differences, and I think there is voice capture. But what do you know of what's out there at the moment?
Well, first of all, I think it's a very important reflex to have to um, capture your thoughts as seamlessly and as instantly as possible. Because the moment there's friction between you and taking that note, like for instance, that's why I don't carry a notebook with me. I used to 15, 20 years ago, but not anymore because
Yeah,
my thoughts are usually, it's not a word, it's not a sentence, it's multiple sentences. So if I had to
yeah,
stop and actually write out multiple sentences every time I had a thought, that would take a lot of time every day, every week. Uh, and I do use Google Keep. That's my main instant offloading device. And because it's Google, it's made by Google, it's integrated within the Google ecosystem. So whenever I use my phone, for instance, I'm walking or I'm riding my bicycle, I could use my headphones, and there's like a little button for the Google Assistant, and I say as soon as it's activated, I say note to self XYZ, and then that automatically saves it to my Google Keep because I designated Google Keep as my notes repository. You can do that in the Google Assistant. If you go to the Google app, go into your settings, Google Assistant, there's a section called Notes, and from there you can choose what app or what repository will capture all of your notes. I use Google Keep, but you can use any other repository you want. I found that very useful because, again, since it's the Google ecosystem, I can do that while I'm. Yesterday, I was driving. While I'm driving, I just say, "Hey, Google, note to self," and from the car, it goes to my phone and it's saved on a cloud, so that later on, when I come home, I just look at my Google Keep. Same thing with my voice assistants. I have a few Google Home speakers in our apartment, and whether I'm in the bathroom or the living room or anywhere, I can take notes at any point in time. The other thing that's great, beyond notes, is often reminders, because notes are great for thoughts, but sometimes all you want is just a little reminder for minor task, sometimes today or in the next few days, like water the
hmm
plants, or go buy some milk. That's also very, very useful when you do it by voice, and that is a very I guess, rudimentary form of AI. It recognizes your voice, transcribes everything, knows that it's a task or a note, and based on that, either creates a note or creates a task with a reminder. And I find that even that rudimentary AI is amazing for thought capture. It's great.
Right.
And now there's more and more, I guess, apps that take that to the next level, where I think it's called MEM AI, MEM AI, where it's kind of like Google Keep or OneNote or Notion, except that it's AI enhanced. And I might be wrong because I've never really used it, but in my understanding, what it does is these random thoughts that you throw, you don't have to further organize them into a system with the sections and labels.
Okay.
It just automatically finds, I guess, links using AI based on I guess semantic similarity. It's the same concept, same date. I'm not entirely sure, but from what I understand, that's the general idea behind this kind of note-taking system.
Okay. Interesting. These note taking systems are, so I love the ones that I use, but and I love Google Keep, but they're the, how can I say? I used to have a BlackBerry, so back in the day, some of our listeners won't know what that is at this point, but and the BlackBerry had programmable buttons. And on my BlackBerry, I programmed one of the buttons to instantly open some text program that BlackBerry had. So I didn't have to turn it on. I could just press this button and it would automatically launch this program. And then I could instantly capture with that program. Now, I've always wanted that step where one touch and then I could enter using text. Now, the reason I've wanted that step ever since then, and I've not been able to reproduce it in my Android. The reason I wanted that step is that it was easy and it was instant. It was, it opened the door. Just tap and it opened the door. And it was rugged because I'm pressing the button. I'm not pressing the screen, I'm not pressing the keys. I'm pressing a button. And buttons feel rugged. So I could fashion the BlackBerry so that I could instantly get into text capture.
Yeah.
The thing I liked about that was that it wasn't made by BlackBerry to necessarily do that, because you had to assign the app to the button.
Mm-hmm.
But what I ended up with was it felt like a kind of a seamless, rugged. When I say rugged, I mean sweat didn't bother it. That not as much. It was sort of customized for the nature of capturing. I don't know how to say that any better, but capturing that's behind an app is still 2 steps removed. On my phone, I would have to open give it the password. So I have to get to the password before I got to the app. But what I really want to do is I want to bypass everything, because the nature of capture is that you want to do this thing in many different physical circumstances. You want it to happen very, very quickly. It's peculiar, but the machine that I use, my Android, is not built, and I've figured out how to build it so that it can do these things as effortlessly as I want them to. So it's almost as if the developer hasn't cottoned on to the nature of capturing and the specific challenges of capturing. And that's just one step. So, because if Google Keep had even, figured it out, they would say, oh, people are using Google Keep to capture. Oh, here's how we help them take the next step.
Mm-hmm.
So there would be a little bit of AI built into Google Keep that says, let me help this person to process this task that they're capturing for the first time. I understand what it is. I understand the nature of the task. and I understand how to help them. For example, not forget. So if I haven't emptied the task in 2 days, it should come back and remind me, right? Because it understands what I'm trying to do, and it's programmed to interact with me in the heat of the battle, so to speak.
Yeah.
Not when things are perfect. When things are perfect, I'm at my desk and I capture into a program that's a web program, and it's nice and big, and I'm settled. I'm not sweat. I'm in ideal circumstances, and I'm using their app. But capture is not often doesn't take place in an ideal situation.
Mm-hmm.
And no one seems to have cottoned on to, and this is just the first, like I said, this is just the first step. No one has caught on to the nature of this particular task and tried to say, okay, how do we take away all the friction? What's the amazing way we could have our app become the app for this particular task? The way a notebook LM has become the standard for that particular task. They figured out this problem that people have, and they solved it. It's an amazing solution using AI for. I use it every day now. I can't imagine my life without it. It's been, oh my God, this is like a huge jump from where I was before. But the same doesn't apply to just the act of capturing. Just the one act of task management is what I'm. That's why I think my capturing hasn't gotten any better than it was 10 years ago. Same thing. Like,
Yeah.
if you were to put AI to that, or just thought, heck, maybe you don't even need AI, but just enough thought to say, improve it in a particular way that is suitable for everybody who needs to capture on the fly, whether they're driving, running, swimming, maybe not swimming, but what do you think?
I don't know if this depends on the model or type of phone you use. I have an Android myself, and the way I do it is, if I'm just using if all I have is my phone, I don't have any headphones on me or anything. I press the power button for about a second, and the assistant pops up. All I have to say is, "Note to self: here's a thought that I had." And then it automatically adds it to my Google Keep. Um, if I'm using earbuds or a headphone or headphones, usually there's a button to the left where if you press, it automatically brings up the assistant. And again, all I have to do is note to self XYZ, or remind me to do XYZ. So I think it might depend on how you set up your phone. I remember back in the day, you had to download a custom ROM and jailbreak the phone and set up a special, like a special like a custom shortcuts for how you use the different power and volume buttons. But now I think, at least for Android, it's just, as far as I can tell with the latest models, you just press the power button and it brings up the assistant. And once the assistant is live, you can just say note to self XYZ. And I find it even easier when I'm wearing my headphones, or when I'm driving. When I'm driving and it's connected through Android Auto to the car, I don't even have to press on anything. I just say, "Hey Google, note to self XYZ," and that actually has made my life safer, because I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years ago, I would be driving and I would need to pull over to actually take a note on my phone, whereas now it's
Right.
it's automated. The transcription is instant, and it automatically adds it to your favorite note-taking tool, and in which, for me, it's Google Keep, at least for the instant stuff.
Right.
So I think it really depends on how you set up your phone, or the tools that you use with your phone, like your headset. I don't have anything fancy. Like, I remember even 5 years ago, I had a cheap pair of headphones that also had that little shortcut where it automatically brings up your
That
Google
particular
Assistant.
app.
Yeah.
Oh, Yeah, I think the difference is that we can make Google Assistant do some of the things we're talking about, but there's nobody, as far as we know, nobody trying to solve the capturing problem as the capturing problem. So there's a dedicated solution
Yeah.
to it that meets all, all platforms, all
Yeah.
circumstances, that that does this, and also allows you to dispose at the end, because Google Keep isn't easy to dispose
Yeah.
from my use of it. It's not. You still have to get in. You still have to. And there's no automatic anything going on in Google Keep, not yet anyway. But a smart AI could separate, for example, what I have as good ideas versus tasks that I need to accomplish.
Yeah.
Those aren't the same. Some of them are just, oh, look, this is an interesting idea I heard on a podcast. I'd love to go research it some more.
I thought you
So
were
that's
going to
one thing.
say separate good ideas from bad ideas, because I also record a lot of bad ideas that, in retrospect, when I come back to it a few days or even a few weeks later, I'm like, I should not even have recorded that. But, I also think that I assume you might agree that it's better to over capture than to under
Yeah.
capture.
And sometimes I'm sure you've under captured like I have. And after you get back to wherever you're getting to empty, you're like, what the hell was this? It doesn't make any sense now. It seems
Yeah.
like it made perfect sense when you captured it, but no, you're like, what is this? So if the AI could say, would you like to add more details? Because what you put here doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Or this is an awful, as happens to me, looks an awful lot like another idea that you had previously. Is it the same as that?
Yeah.
And I would say, oh yeah, that's the same. Scratch that.
It's
Or if
the
it's
AI telling you, hey, your memory is not as good as it used to be.
yeah, I'd take the correction. I'd say, point taken. Thank you very much. You're
Yeah.
imprudent and whatnot. But the and I think we're just, we spent 10 minutes talking about this particular solution. If someone were to really understand it and work at it, I think they could sweep the market, because they would understand this. The way notebook LM inventors understood that, they would understand this at a level at which it would have the input would be easy, the output would be easy, the brains of all of the powers of AI would be at work. You'd have machine learning, as you were saying, and it would change the way the task is managed once it were captured. And it would make our lives easier, as opposed to this kind. What we're doing is dumb capture, dumb emptying. It's all very manual and very slow, and it's hard. But there's no effort to make it easier. I've not heard or read anything that said, "Oh, let me try and make it easier." But you tell me, have you seen it?
I actually thought about it recently, whether I should link um, my Google Keep account to an OpenAI account or an Anthropic account that would go through all the notes and
Mm-hmm.
then automatically either label them as where should they go. Is this a
Mm-hmm.
calendar event? Is this a note for research? Is this
Mm-hmm.
something that you should add to OneNote? Is it something else?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is this a good idea? Is this a terrible idea? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and this is just my type of personality. Um, Let me give you an example with money. With money, many years ago, I read somewhere that even rich people, wealthy people, still track their money. They track their expenses. And I thought, at first, I thought, what do you mean? They're rich. And then essentially the argument, I don't know to what extent it's true, but the argument was, well, they got rich because they track their expenses. They know where their money goes. Um, and so at first I tried, I think at the time it was called the mint.ca or mint.com. And it automatically links to your bank account and tracks your expenses so that in hindsight, you can see how much money went to, bank fees, restaurants, rent, and so on. But then I met a group of people that essentially had a different philosophy. And they said, we have the technology to do this automatically. We have the technology to track your expenses automatically for you. But that is not necessarily a good thing for everyone. Because if you track your expenses manually with your app, so every time you go to a pizza place, you record how much you spent based on the receipt. If you go to the grocery stores, same thing. If you go to the museum, same thing. You essentially, it takes not even a second, but you do it yourself. And the argument was that if you do it yourself, at least you're consciously aware of where your money goes every time you do it. And that makes you more deliberate, more intentional with the way you spend your money. Because when it's automatic, well, you just, you spend and spend and spend and spend. At the end of the month, you just briefly glance at your expenses and you're like, whatever. But when you do it manually every time, it really creates this level of consciousness around expenses that I think is hard to replicate when it's automated. And so in the same way, as I was trying to think through the not very complicated steps to use AI to label and even sort my Google Keep notes, I thought, I still want to be in control. And I know this is objectively or arguably a quote unquote waste of time. But it's one of those things where, so speaking of which, in AI, in technology in general, there's this, it's called the out of the loop problem, where the more you automate, the more likely it is that you're going to be out of the loop in terms of what's going on in your system. And that might be a good thing, for things that are low stakes. But to me, whatever goes into my Google Keep are usually high level ideas, strategic ideas, sometimes some minor stuff. But at the very least, I want to be conscious of what's going on in there and manually remove things, sort things out, classify things, organize things. I want to do it manually, just that it's top of mind. I'm very selective about what to automate and what not to automate, just because I'm selective about what I want to be aware of and what I don't want to be aware of. So again, to give you I guess an example, there's one thing that I automate is the hundreds of Google Scholar alerts I get every week about new research related to time management, productivity, and so on. It's automatically sorted because there's so much of it that what are the odds that me going through each email left on unread from Google Scholar alerts, going through each email manually would actually be beneficial for me? It's not very beneficial because what are the odds that on any given week there's some massive new study that's going to completely change my life and my work? Very unlikely. But the things I think about, when I'm in the shower, when I'm riding my bicycle, when I'm doing the dishes, those are potentially and very often strategic ideas for the long term for my business, for what I want to do with my life. And so those things I need to be aware of. Even if it could be automated in principle, I still want to be aware of it, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, that makes the two examples you gave are great because we all have them going on, and they both seem ripe for AI assisted. So the one with respect to money, so that how you spend your money is very similar to how you spend your time, right? And I literally capture how I spend my day at the end of each day. Then I put it into an app. But the app has no smarts whatsoever. I could do what you said, right? I could, port that information. And I've told myself, I should put it into AI somewhere and actually analyze the numbers. I haven't done it. And it would be easier if it were built into the app itself. And the app could say, oh, look, in the last month you have, and it would say, you may want to spend more time doing this and less time doing that. Your time spent sleeping was this and that and that. I'm a great napper, so I don't know, am I napping enough? Not enough? Does it take away from my sleep? Don't know. It could tell me all these things if it had any kind of intelligence. And I imagine there must be somebody doing that particular app somewhere. I think someone did contact me with some, but it wasn't AI driven though. But anyway, that's another simple one that if you understand the nuances of time capture, it's not the same as money capture.
Mhm.
Those are two different animals. But if you understood the differences, then you could, stick your AI on it, and then the AI could clean things up, represent them, understand you, provide insights, show you exceptions, alert you, remind you, do all the things that you'd want an agent to do on your behalf.
Yep.
But someone would have to understand the problem. And so
Yeah.
far, I haven't found anybody and I know of any programmers or anything I've read that says, "Oh, these folks, they really understand this problem," because the way they're going about solving it comes from this kind of deep understanding that they folks who did the Mint, I think you said it was
Yes.
the money tracking people,
Mhm.
they really understand money tracking and wealth, and it shows up in the way they design the app. It seems that equivalent hasn't happened um, in the time usage space. That's the first thing that you said that caught my attention. I
Yeah.
think that's another one of our insights for
I've,
today.
I've been thinking
My
about
dialogue.
this. I've been
Yeah,
thinking
you have.
about this a lot, and the thing that pains me is that I had this. This was just last year. I had this. I wanted to. I realize now that most of what I do in the time management and productivity sphere is very immaterial. I do consulting. I do more and more. I work with custom made applications. I do research. I'm writing a book. But at the end, I was thinking, what's a material thing I can do in this sphere? And I was thinking about this prototype of a little, a very tiny necklace or pendant or that you
Ooh,
wear around your neck. It's a very tiny camera that would take every minute or so just a screenshot
ooh.
or a photo of what it
Mhm.
is you're doing, just a photo, or even continuous recording, 24/7, just for maybe a
Yeah.
week or two, then upload it to an AI because now AI does video analysis as well. And of course, at least now this would require a tremendous amount of compute. In principle, it is very possible to get a highly detailed, context-rich description of how you use your time day in, day out. But then one thing that I really like to use AI for is here's my thinking. A, are there any assumptions that are wrong, inaccurate, or questionable? And B, what am I not thinking of? And the reason why I decided against doing this thing is simply because um, the main issue is privacy. When you
Privacy.
commercialize things, yes, huge,
It's
huge issue
interesting.
around privacy. Um, there's already some like privacy conscious version of it called Humanize, and it's I think it doesn't record the actual content of conversations, for instance, Humanize with a Y, and I'm like that's great, but again, it doesn't give you enough context and enough richness around the way you use your time. So there's this. Uh, that's why I like to use AI. It's to again explore what I don't know. You know how Donald Rumsfeld said, "There's known knowns,"
Right.
things we know,
Right.
and so on. So I like to explore the unknown unknowns of what I think about. So Brad
Right.
has an idea; he wants to do something, but I also am very aware of my intellectual limitations. I don't know everything, and
Right.
AI can help me shed light on that. So what is it that I'm not thinking of? And to me, that's one of the most important use cases of AI for productivity.
Wow, that's a really good one. Into what you don't know. Um, so there's two of them that you just mentioned that I want to comment on. And there actually are two more insights. So the first one was I'm getting a ton of email, but there's that my I don't have an agent to read it. So everyone has that version of, there's a volume of email, and most of it is newsletters, and I use Unroll, which is
Yes.
crude. There's no smarts in that thing whatsoever. It's just a filter program. It's not doing anything really. But it could. Every time I signed up for a newsletter, can't it tell? I mean, why do I have to tell it every single time that I sign up for? It should just ask me.
Yeah.
It should just prompt me. This is not rocket science. 100,000 people are getting the same thing. So I'm obviously not the special person. You can tell. So you know that this is not. It's a newsletter. It's something that I could ask you to manage via triage.
Mhm.
So that's the one. So the volume of not just email, but also emails that I've received, because I also get Google alerts on some keywords, and it's drinking from a fire hose. I only want to know about the two things, same thing you said, 2 things per year that are really interesting.
Yeah.
And I could download them all and load them up into it, and I could do all that manual work, but I'm not going to do it. Instead, I just want something smart to say, hey, would you like me to manage these for you and tell you when something is interesting? And I go, please do that for me. Yes.
Yeah.
So
There's
I'm
some work
wishing that.
around, like you said, it is work. So for instance, for Google Alerts on my Gmail, all I did was it's essentially create a filter where every time I get a Google alert, it doesn't it's automatically labeled as red, so that it doesn't show as an unread. I want to stay at inbox 0. So it's labeled as red, and then automatically put into a folder called Google Alerts, so that once a week, when on my time, I will check those alerts instead of them bothering me every time with a new unread email. Something that I've been also doing recently, it's been very helpful, because now I'm it's getting to a point where I'm getting too many alerts, and so I have a very long prompt about who I am, what I do, my interests, and what kind of studies are interesting to me. I just put everything. I use Thunderbird. It's an email client. Thunderbird. I export all of my Google alerts into one single text file, and just put it into Notebook LM, because Notebook LM has a huge context window, which means that I can read all of my emails in one shot and give me the top 10, 20, 30 best studies that might fit my preferences. So it's 2 layers of AI, because the first layer is obviously Google scanning new research for you and finding top 10, top 20 every week. But even that is a lot. So the second layer is Google Notebook, trying to find exactly what you need. I found that it saves me a lot of time. But again, like you said, there's no one button solution. You have to get an email client, export your emails, put them into Google Notebook LM, and so on.
And after you've done it a few times and come up empty-handed, you're like, you know what?
Yeah.
Forget it.
Yeah.
But the third insight, maybe fourth insight that you said, which is, it's not really. Let's say that it's not a task management problem per se, but for the AI to pick out things that I don't know or I'm not aware of, that so it's if it, from a knowledge point of view, if you've uploaded enough stuff into, let's say I just lost the name of it, the one we just mentioned. Oh boy, I had a senior
Notebook?
moment there. Yeah, Notebook LM. I was going to say knowledge LM, but I said no. So I've loaded enough stuff into Notebook LM. What I have not done, and I keep thinking I should do, but the overhead of doing it is just too hard, is I should load up all of my writing into Notebook LM. And if there were an easy way to do it, a one-button solution, I sure would. I would just say, take everything from my blog, take everything from my book, take everything from everything I've written over here in Substack, and understand it. And then if I could ask it, okay, I now want you to go through and find new areas of knowledge that I should be pursuing based on, and you could even read all my recent emails. You could listen to this podcast, for example, listen to all of my conversations online, take it all and give me 3 quality new findings
Mhm.
that would move the needle the most right now. The only thing that, in a way, that stops me from doing that is the overhead of all of the steps required to coalesce or to conglomerate all that information. But it seems as if I had a really good agent or a really good AI, I would just say, I would just point it in the direction and say, go look over here, go look over here, go look over there, go look over there. Create a profile of what I know
Mhm.
and what I'm focusing on and all the ideas that I have, and find the three next big ideas based on what you see that I don't know, and I'll that you probably come back with two of them I already know and one that I know, and then I will tell you I already know that, go find some more. But it would be this new kind of dialogue with an invisible partner that I've never heard anyone mention the possibility of how that would work. But
Yeah.
for people who are knowledge professionals, that would be like gold.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a great idea, Brad. I hope nobody's listening to it and they put it in play before you do. But it's kind of doable today. It's kind of,
I think
I
when it
could
comes to
kind of
AI,
do it, but boy.
I think when it comes to AI, I would say a good rule of thumb is if you can think about it, it's probably already doable to some extent. And if it's
Mm-hmm,
not entirely doable, it's definitely going to be doable in the next year or so. That's
mm-hmm,
how, at least in my experience, is how fast AI evolves. It's evolving extremely fast. And a lot of the things that we talk about today might be completely irrelevant next year or in the next 5 years.
You mean they would already be done, or they would already have been conceived of?
What I mean is, AI might, the new generation of AI might disrupt the way we work economically so much that even basic things we talk about might not be relevant. Just the way, I don't know, in the 1800s, someone trying to talk about how this new plow is more efficient and
Mm-hmm,
maybe they need this other kind of plow. Well, the next year there's tractor trucks, and that
mm-hmm,
becomes completely irrelevant.
mm-hmm,
Uh,
mm-hmm,
and so I think, or like, the 1860s, people talking about this new kind of bucket
mm-hmm,
that's more, more efficient, more ergonomic to go fetch the water from the well.
mm-hmm.
That becomes irrelevant the moment you have indoor plumbing. Uh,
Right,
so
right.
that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. So to what extent is AI, and by AI I don't mean just like a little chatbot that we use.
Mm-hmm,
I mean AI, agentic AI, an agent capable of doing work. To what extent is that going to change the very way we do work? And to what extent are some of the things we worry or concerned about today in terms of work, is that even going to be relevant 2, 3, 5 years from now?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly what's happening in the world. If we just look at the conversation that we're having now versus the one that we would have before the advent of ChatGPT,
Yeah.
I think the conversation we're having now has an urgency to it because we can actually we can really see these things happening now. Before it was the stuff of maybe one day, but now it just seems like it's a matter of having the right developer decide to work on it. It's having seen what AI can do, and now that we're using it every day, it's changing the way that we even think about the context is completely different. And I think it's gonna, same way you said, it's gonna keep changing, and it's gonna render some things obsolete. It's gonna create new opportunities. And hopefully in the task management space, there'll be people who take take the niche seriously enough that there'll be the kind of innovation that we're seeing over in the knowledge world.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Well, Brad, we're just about at the end of the time that we're meant to spend together. We didn't even talk about all elements of task management, but there is a common theme, a common thread through the ones that we talk about and the ones that we didn't even get to. How can folks get in touch with you and learn some more about your research and the work that you're doing?
I'm very active on social media, on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, Instagram. 3 times a week, I try to share, the content of new research, particularly on time management and productivity, and what it means for you. So my goal really is to make scientific research more accessible and useful and practical for everyone. So, social media or my website, bradaeon.com. That's BRADAEON.com. And thank you so much for listening.
It's great. Folks, I can recommend that following Brad is like having a splash of cold water thrown in your face every week or so. Always saying something interesting that I've not thought about or heard. And it's just a lot of fun to be on the cutting edge and watching him do his work. So, and this is with LinkedIn that I'm talking about mostly. So, folks, keep listening. Let me tell you what's coming up in future episodes. A future episode here at the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Here's an excerpt from our next episode with Stephen Puri.
Well, a problem that gets exacerbated when we have ADHD is everybody can look at a task list because we're all adults, we have stuff to do, and be overwhelmed. There are 9 things I could be doing this morning. Where do I begin? Sometimes the number of tasks is simply the overwhelm. It's not even that any one of them is gargantuan. It is that I get tired just looking at this. You know what? Let me check my email real quick. Let me scroll real quick over here. Let me go run to the bathroom, whatever, right? So there's that. That is multiplied when you have ADHD. And the thought of doing 8 or 9 things, well, okay, well, I kind of jump between things and get into that frenzied ADHD mode of like doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this other thing, right? That makes it even harder.
And if you want to leave a comment about this episode or any aspect of the work that we're doing here at the Task Management and Time Blocking Podcast, you can go over to www.replytofrancis.info and send me either a message by text or send me a voice message, a voice note. And as you probably know, we have a couple of places that you can interact with other people, talk about this episode. One is at the community, mightytaskers.scheduleu.org, and you'll see the link in the show notes. And the other, of course, is our upcoming Task Management and Time Blocking Summit coming up in March. 2 outstanding opportunities to interact with other people about the ideas that you've heard on this podcast or any of our episodes that are coming up. And if you'd like to support the work we're doing, I invite you to click on the Patreon link below to make a donation. And please don't forget to like our show and recommend it to others on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, or whatever podcast app or service you're using. This is Francis Wade. I'm signing out. I hope to see you on a future episode. And until then, take care and all the best. See you later.